you so much for joining me. This is Parsha Perspectives from Rav Asher Zelig Rubenstein Zatzal, my Rebbe, on Parshas Emor, and the title is Choosing Kedusha and Life. We know the first pasuk in Emor is a command that Moshe is giving to Aaron HaKohen, and it says, Hashem tells him, Emor el HaKohen and b'nei Aaron v'amarta leim. Pasuk says two expressions of tell them and tell them. So Rashi asks this question based on Chazal, why is there a double expression? And he says that it's because the elders are supposed to be told first, and then they'll tell it over. So there's a Masorah that's happening. Emor el HaKohen, first tell the sages, and then v'amarta leim, then they'll tell over to the other ones. And so there's this concept that the older people are going to be teaching the younger. And we know that Rav Asher was always stressing the idea that we have a Masorah, there's always the elders that are teaching us, and that's very, very important. And so what's the first mitzvah? The mitzvah is that you're not allowed to become tamei. A Kohen has a special law, a male Kohen is not allowed to become tamei. So why is this? So Rav Asher explained, the Chazal tell us that tumah is chet. What does that mean? When a person's alive, his neshama is present, and whether he uses it or not, it's still there, and it elevates the body. And so therefore, a person that's alive is not makabel tumah by his body being alive. If he goes near a corpse, or a person dies, then their body is now makabel tumah. Why? Why is a dead body makabel tumah? The Orach Chaim and other Mefarshim say it's because if a person is no longer alive and he's missing his neshama, so there's nothing there, so there's only tumah. The guf is tamei. And so a person has to make sure that his priority in life is always that he's putting his neshama forward. And in fact, this is Rav Asher says that this goes so far that Chazal tell us that Rishon, when they're around, even when they're alive, they're still considered dead. They're still tamei because they've banished their own neshamas. So that's what it refers to. And Chazal tell us, and this is not halacha l'maisa, although there's a big dispute about this, but that tzaddikim, even in their death, they're not makabel tumah. Of course, one should not rely on that if they're a Kohen, although there are sources that seem to say that it was reliable in Atosis and Ksubas, but we're not going to get into that. But bottom line is that tzaddikim are not makabel tumah because they've used their body for Kedusha, and they've used it and they've purified it. Anyway, so the point is that we have to ask ourselves, said Rav Asher, what percent of my body is Kedusha? Am I using my neshama to make it kadosh? And what percent of my body is tumah? And during this time of Kabbalah Satorah, as we're working towards Shavuos, that's exactly what we're counting towards to be able to add this Kedusha to our lives. And that's Emor Lakonim B'nei Aaron V'Amarta Leim. That's exactly the message that has to be given over, the importance of Kedusha, that when we look at our Gedolim and people above us, we see the Kedusha they have. And with that, Rav Asher used to tell over many, many stories. I'll tell you a couple of them. So basically, Rav Asher told over that he was very close to Rav Chatzkel Levenstein of Panovich, and he was there in Eretz Yisrael for 2.5 years, and he asked Rav Chatzkel permission to go home for a visit. And he told him, "Don't worry, I'm going to come back, and I'm certainly going to keep learning." So Rav Chatzkel said to him, "You're not afraid?" So Rav Asher said, I looked at him and said, "Afraid of what?" He said, the tumah, Eretz of Chutz La'aretz. He explained that he lived in America in 1945. When he left Shanghai, the Mir Yeshiva was saved from the Holocaust. They escaped to Shanghai, and Rav Chatzkel and his good friend Rav Chaim Shmulevitz, who was the son of the son-in-law of Rav Lezer Yudel Finkel, who was the Rosh Yeshiva, who had escaped the war and actually was in Eretz Yisrael, setting up to bring the yeshiva to Eretz Yisrael. So they left. Rav Chatzkel and Rav Chaim Shmulevitz were in charge. And in Shanghai, the growth that took place there was phenomenal, and Rav Chatzkel was in charge. And so what ended up happening was that Rav Chatzkel ended up right after the war, when they left Shanghai. Shanghai was an international city, and they ended up bringing all the refugees there to America, and many of them settled there. Some of them moved on from America, and some of them went on to Eretz Yisrael, including Rav Chaim Shmulevitz himself. Rav Chatzkel actually lived there, and so basically, the story that Rav Asher always quotes from both Rav Chatzkel and Rav Chaim Shmulevitz are very interesting and worth repeating in themselves. So with Rav Chatzkel, he would say that Rav Chatzkel was very, very disturbed by the tumah of America. And you're talking about 1945, all the hefkeris and all the tumah there. And so what ended up happening was that there was one day that he saw a couple of the students, because there was a Mir Yeshiva in Brooklyn that had been established, and he saw a couple of students were very upset. And he asked them, "What's the matter? Are you okay?" Because he cared about people. And they said, "Someone died." And he said, "Oh, who is it?" They said, "Oh, he's not Jewish. His name was Babe Ruth. Rebbe wouldn't know who he was." What? He said, "Explain it to me." "He's a baseball player." "What does he do?" "He hits a ball and he runs around bases." What was so great? He really knew how to hit the ball and he really knew how to run. And after this, he was so perturbed by the notion of people being upset about Babe Ruth's death, that after that he went to Eretz Yisrael. That's the story with Rav Chatzkel. The story with Rav Chaim Shulevitz is that he used to always say, when I grew up in Europe, I never understood. Chazal tell us that Esav and Yaakov, they split Olam Haza and Olam Haba. He said, I understand that Yaakov wants Olam Haba because it's so important, it's so vital, it's what we believe in. But he says, Esav wasn't a dummy. He said, I grew up in Europe, and what Olam Haza do we have? We all lived in abject poverty. We never had any food. We never had anything. So what exactly? Esav wasn't stupid. So what was Esav looking for? What is there in Olam Haza that he actually thought was worth taking? Because Rav Chaim Shulevitz just was never exposed to anything. And he said, I never understood the uncle Esav. That's what he referred to us. Our uncle Esav. He said, but then I came to America, and I understood and I saw with my own eyes. He wasn't stupid. He was a smart man. His desires were real. And that was Rav Chaim Shulevitz coming to America in 1945 and then leaving and going to Eretz Yisrael. Anyway, so Rav Chatzkel said to Rav Asher, the story probably took place in the early 60s. He said, you're not afraid? That's what he was referring to. So Rav Chatzkel said to him, I had to run away from the Tumah, and we moved to Eretz Yisrael. It takes a whole lifetime to take out the Tumah from the Neshama, just from the walk that I take from my yeshiva. Now, does this mean that we shouldn't go out? Look, we're all in quarantine anyway, so quite frankly, we might as well take advantage and say that we're doing it for holy reasons. But the bottom line is that we have to be aware that when we go out, we have to prepare ourselves. And we have to know what's out on the street and what kind of influences are there. That's the point. There was another story that Rav Asher used to always tell over that Rav Michal Feinstein invited Rav Chatzkel to speak at his kollel in Tel Aviv. And this was one of the most prominent kollim of all of Eretz Yisrael, and Rav Chatzkel declined. And Rav Michal kept begging him, we need your musar, you need to come here, you're my Rebbe, you have to help me. So finally Rav Chatzkel said to him, I can't go to Tel Aviv. So Rav Michal said, look, I understand, I know that you have your own schedule, and I know that you don't want to travel out of the yeshiva. He said, I'll send a cab for you with 2 Avreichim who will hold your hand the entire time from when they take you out of yeshiva until they bring you to my yeshiva, and you'll be with them the entire time. Okay? So Rav Asher said he remember that day when they came to pick him up. Rav Chatzkel agreed because he was told that he had to go and he had to be inspire others. And when they were on Panovich Hill pulling out of the Panovich Yeshiva, he said Rav Chatzkel put his head down and was hiding. And when they got to Tel Aviv, the 2 Bachrim that were with him said that he was literally shaking, and they were very moved by it. So they walked him in, he said his shmooze. After he finished, he closed his eyes, they walked him out, they brought him back to yeshiva, and Rav Asher told over, I was there when he came back, and he was white as a ghost, and he said, never again will I go out of the yeshiva, and he just never did it again. Now, we're not on Rav Chatzkel's level, we unfortunately have to go outside, but the point is that there's a sensitivity to, I don't want to be influenced by the Tumah in the world around us. And that's really, really important because we're choosing Kedusha. Another thing also, the next segment is called Even Against His Will. So in the Parsha of Tumah, we have a question to ask. You have Kohanim that have special restrictions. So let's say the Kohen says, hey, this is too hard. I'm a vater on my kahuna. The golf course is right over the Beis HaKfaros. I can't live with these restrictions. I need to be able to go golfing. So Rashi brings down the din of the Kedusha means even against his will. You force him to follow the rules. So this is an important use of chinuch, which is a very important one that has to be balanced as well. And every educator has to know it. Lahazar gedolim al katanim, like we said, your job is to inspire. You have to teach the beauty and the meaning of Torah. But sometimes you need to teach the Baal Korcho. Sometimes you also need to have a certain force. But Rav Asher, by the way, did not enforce this very much. As much as he spoke fire and brimstone, when you spoke to him, he was always trying to accommodate because he believed that the beauty of Torah will inspire people. And so he was not into chumras at all. And anything that was a chumrah was always downplayed because he felt so strongly about that which was the essence. And I think that's important. And so Rav Asher told over that Rav Chatzkel would talk about shleimus. Our purpose in life is to become shalom, is to be whole and to be good people and work on ourselves. And Rav Asher himself says, I wouldn't have the nerve to even talk about the subject if not for the fact that I was instructed by Rav Chatzkel to say over what I heard from him, and to teach it to the next generation. So that's why I have the audacity to talk about things that I'm far from myself. That's what Rav Asher would say. And I'm just repeating Rav Asher's shmooze here, so obviously there's nothing to even say. Rav Chatzkel spoke about shleimus, because that's the goal of Yiddishkeit. So he said, it's not a matter of how big your carbon is. Let it be a shalom. So for instance, you have a person who's a masmid. He learns 16 hours a day, but those 16 are chopped up. He talks, he naps, he does this, he does that. So it's better to learn an amount without interrupting himself, but with shlemus. And that's talking about someone that's in yeshiva. Someone that's at a yeshiva, his day should be spent with productive things. Rav Asher used to always tell over the story to clarify what he meant. Rav Chaim Vital was once at a shir of his Rebbe, the Arizal, and the Arizal was speaking about the exalted state of neshamos of the Kadmonim, the earlier people that lived. And it's known that when, for example, the Arizal went to the Galil, he revealed where all the Kfarim were, where they didn't know. He's the one that literally revealed where a lot of people that we didn't know where they were buried, with different Nevi'im, etc. So the Arizal came to an empty field, and he said, this is Rav Yossi ben Kisma's kever, he's buried here. And then he would speak about the neshama of Rav Yossi ben Kisma. He did that for Akiva, he did that for Hillel, Shammai. All these Kfarim that we know today in the Galil are because the Arizal revealed them to us. So one of his drashas, Rav Chaim Vital, said to him, Rebbe, I give up. He said, I heard you just give all these shiurim, and you explained the great actions of these great people, and I'm nothing. Everything I do doesn't compare. I'm worthless, and I'm nothing. So the Arizal said back, you're right and you're wrong. You're right that compared to them you are nothing, and so am I. But you're wrong if you think that your avodah is not more dear to Hashem. Hashem looks at it, lefum tsar agra, and the avodas Hashem that you do in this tamei world that we live in. Remember, this is 1500 spot, this tamei world. So 500 years ago, that is worth so much more to Hashem. And this is my own thing. I remember Rav Shimshon Pincus used to always say that, whenever I say halal, and I say, I say, Hashem, you pull me out of the garbage can. He said, I think about Ricky Vager when he would say those words of halal, and he would say, Hashem, you pull me out of a garbage can. And that was referring to, Posen in the late 1700s, early 1800s. How bad was it? He said, when we say, "Me ashpos yarim evyon," he said, look at the ashpos that we live in, the garbage dump that we live in this degraded world, and look at this evyon, how poor we are, impoverished we are in Maisim. It has so much more meaning. But yet, yarim, Hashem lifts us up. That's more dear to Hashem. And with all the tumah, with all the challenges, that's what Hashem loves about us. And this is really, really important. So as the generations go on and the challenges get bigger, your actions are more dear to Hashem. And this story of the Arizal, Rav Asher said that the Chavetz Chaim used to tell it over. And that's how Rav Asher knows the story, because he heard it from the Panamid Rav, who would say it over from the Chavetz Chaim. The Chavetz Chaim said this very, very often. And in fact, he would cry. And he would say that the tumah that's here, the tumah that the final generations will see before Mashiach is going to be so great. But Rabbosai, the Chavetz Chaim, would say, don't give up. The Arizal taught his Talmidim that their small actions are more dear to Hashem. All the more so nowadays. Our small actions are more dear to Hashem. And that's where Rav Asher would inspire us to appreciate what we're doing and our own avodah. Thank you so much for joining me.